The prison transport van rolled through the rusted steel gates just before dawn. Its brakes hissed as armed guards stepped out, their boots echoing across the cracked concrete yard. Inside, the prisoners sat in silence, each man pretending not to notice the others. Fear was a weakness no one wanted to reveal. Among them was a broad-shouldered man in worn work clothes. His hands were rough, stained by years of labor in a factory. A faded jacket hung loosely over his frame, and his eyes remained calm despite the chains around his wrists. His name was Andrei Volkov. According to the transfer papers, he was simply a former steel plant worker convicted after a violent dispute with corrupt officials. No one bothered to read beyond that. As the prisoners were lined up, one guard glanced at Andrei and smirked. "This one won't last a week in cell 7. Another guard laughed. "Maybe not even a day." Cell 7 had a reputation that reached every corner of the prison. It belonged to the smatriashi, the inmate who controlled everything inside the walls. The strongest prisoners answered to him. Food, cigarettes, favors, punishments, nothing happened without his approval. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind the newcomers. Inside, conversations stopped instantly. More than 20 hardened inmates turned toward the entrance. Tattoos covered their arms and necks. Some smiled with amusement, others watched with cold calculation. They were already deciding who would be robbed, who would be beaten, and who would become the newest servant. At the center of the room sat the cell boss, Viktor Sokolov. Thick scars crossed his face, and his heavy fists rested on the table before him. Without standing, he studied the newcomers one by one. His gaze stopped on Andrei. "A factory worker?" Victor asked with a grin after reading the transfer sheet handed to him. One inmate chuckled. "Look at those boots. Definitely some simple laborer." Another laughed. "He'll be washing our clothes before the evening meal." The room filled with mocking laughter. Andrei said nothing. He quietly placed his small prison bag beside an empty bunk and began folding his blanket with careful precision. That small action caught the attention of one older prisoner sitting near the window. The blanket was folded perfectly. Every edge lined up. Every movement was disciplined, practiced, almost military. The old inmate narrowed his eyes. "Interesting." Meanwhile, Victor wasn't impressed. "In this cell," he growled, "everyone earns their place." He pointed toward a filthy bucket in the corner. "Your first job." The room waited for the newcomer to react. Most men begged. Some argued. Others cried. Andrei simply looked at the bucket, then calmly met Victor's eyes. "I don't work for criminals." The laughter disappeared. For a brief second, complete silence filled the cell. Several inmates stood up immediately. No newcomer had ever spoken to Victor like that. One prisoner whispered nervously, "He's dead." Another slowly backed away from the center of the room. But Andrei remained completely still. His breathing never changed. His expression never moved. Only the older inmate by the window continued watching carefully. There was something familiar about that calm. Something he had seen many years ago. On the parade grounds of an elite airborne forces unit, the silence inside cell 7 grew heavier with every passing second. Viktor Sokolov slowly rose from his chair. The wooden legs scraped against the concrete floor, sending a sharp sound through the room. Every inmate instinctively stepped back, creating an open circle around him and Andrei. This was how it always began. Someone challenged Victor. Then came the beating. No one expected the newcomer to survive it. Victor rolled his shoulders and smiled coldly. "You've got courage," he said. "Or maybe you're just too stupid to understand where you are." Andrei remained still. "I understand perfectly." The answer irritated Victor even more. Without another word, he lunged forward and threw a heavy punch aimed at Andrei's face. The strike was fast and powerful, the kind that had broken countless noses over the years. But the punch never landed. At the last possible moment, Andrei shifted only a few inches to the side. The fist sliced through empty air. The movement was so small that several prisoners barely noticed it. Victor stumbled a step forward. Before he could recover, Andre gently pushed him on the shoulder. It wasn't a hard shove. Yet Victor lost his balance and crashed into a metal bunk with a deafening clang. The entire cell froze. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. The strongest man in cell 7 had just been knocked down by what looked like the easiest movement imaginable. Victor climbed to his feet, his face burning with embarrassment. "You'll pay for that." This time he attacked with fury, throwing punch after punch. Left. Right. Hook. Elbow. Every strike was powerful. Every strike missed. Andre never seemed rushed. He moved with quiet efficiency, wasting no energy. His feet stayed balanced, his breathing steady, his eyes fixed calmly on Victor's shoulders instead of his fists. The older inmate by the window watched with growing disbelief. "No," he whispered under his breath. "I've seen this before." Each movement reminded him of military close combat training. Not street fighting. Not boxing. Professional combat. Years ago, while serving his own sentence, he had shared a prison hospital with a retired airborne officer. The old officer had demonstrated the same effortless footwork while teaching younger soldiers. Only elite troops moved like that. Meanwhile, Victor grew exhausted. Sweat poured down his forehead. His breathing became uneven. For the first time in years, fear began replacing anger. Andre still hadn't thrown a single punch. Finally, Victor charged one last time. As he rushed forward, Andre stepped aside, caught Victor's wrist, turned his body, and redirected the attack. The massive inmate slammed face-first onto the concrete floor. The impact echoed through the cell. A painful groan escaped Victor as he struggled to move. Andre released his arm immediately and stepped back. "I don't enjoy fighting," he said quietly. "But I won't let anyone force me to kneel." His voice carried no pride. No hatred. Only certainty. The older inmate slowly stood up, staring at Andre with wide eyes. His hands trembled. "Wait," he said. He looked closely at the faded tattoo hidden beneath Andre's sleeve, a small parachute with wings, almost invisible after years of hard labor. The old prisoner's face turned pale. "I know that insignia." Several inmates turned toward him. He swallowed hard before speaking. "That's not a factory worker." A long silence followed. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he finished the sentence that changed the atmosphere in Cell 7 forever. "He's Airborne Forces. VDV." The words echoed through Cell 7 like a thunderclap. "He's VDV." For several seconds, no one moved. Even Viktor Bersokolov remained on the floor, staring at Andre with disbelief. The confidence that had ruled the cell for years suddenly vanished from his face. The older prisoner stepped closer, never taking his eyes off the faded parachute tattoo. "I served near Pskov many years ago," he said quietly. "I've seen airborne troops train. They moved exactly like you." Andre looked at him but said nothing. Silence was an old habit. The old man nodded slowly. "I knew I recognized that discipline." Around the room, the inmates exchanged uneasy glances. Just minutes earlier they had mocked the newcomer, calling him nothing more than a factory worker. Now every detail seemed different: the calm expression, the perfect posture, the precise way he had folded his blanket, and the effortless way he had defended himself without throwing a single punch. One prisoner whispered, "Why would a VDV soldier end up here?" Another answered, "Whatever happened, don't underestimate him." Victor slowly pushed himself to his feet. His shoulder ached, and blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow. He expected Andre to attack while he was vulnerable. Instead, Andre simply stepped back. "I told you," he said calmly. "I don't fight for pride. I fight only when I have no choice." Those words struck harder than any punch. For years, Victor had ruled through fear. Every newcomer either begged for mercy or challenged him in anger. This man had done neither. He had defended himself with complete control and then stopped the moment the threat ended. The atmosphere in the cell changed. The inmates who had laughed first now avoided Andrei's eyes. One quietly picked up the blanket that had fallen during the fight and placed it neatly on Andrei's bunk. Another moved his belongings to make room. No one ordered them. Respect had replaced intimidation. Later that evening, during the evening meal, an unusual silence filled cell 7. The guards noticed the difference immediately. They expected shouting, arguments, and demands from Victor. Instead, everyone remained calm. One guard frowned. "What happened in here?" No one answered. The iron door slammed shut once more. As darkness settled over the prison, the older inmate finally sat beside Andrei. "I'd been wondering all day," he said softly. "If you really served in the airborne forces, why did they call you an ordinary factory worker?" Andrei looked toward the small barred window, where only a sliver of moonlight reached the cell. "Because that's what I became," he replied. "After the army, I spent years working at a steel plant. I wanted a quiet life." "What changed?" Andrei's expression hardened for the first time. "The factory uncovered a corruption scheme involving powerful men. I refused to stay silent." The old prisoner nodded. "So they silenced you instead?" Andrei didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone in the cell understood. For the first time in years, Cell 7 wasn't ruled by fear, it was united by respect. But beyond the prison walls, the corrupt officials who had framed Andrei still believed they had buried the truth forever. They had no idea that the man they had locked away had just begun the hardest battle of his life.